All right, welcome to America This Week, Monday edition on Tuesday because yesterday was a federal holiday. I'm Matt Taibbi.
And I'm Walter Kern.
And America is just at it's completely in schism, hates itself. It's divided into camps. They hate each other. They are radicalizing more and more by the second. And a couple of news stories since we last did a show have contributed significantly to that. So we're going to get into some of those. I don't know. I'm not sure how funny either of them are, but there are aspects to both that are totally bizarre. And as a media story, it's fascinating because the degree to which one side of America is paying attention to one thing and the other is paying attention to something completely different is amazing. But did you have a good weekend, Walter?
Well, so I wasn't on a formal news fast. I was in New York City, and I had gone to do the Gutfeld show, and then I stayed the weekend because I've been doing this very drab job. I had a flood in my house, and I've been, triaging and saving books and mementos and moving things, and it's been going on for weeks, and it's been depressing. So I thought, I'll have fun in New York. I'll eat good food, and so on. And I somehow got out of the news stream.
Nice.
And then got on the plane, and it was a big bummer, man.
Oh,
this
yeah.
church bit. Did you hear about the church thing? Did you da? And it's funny when you miss. It's like when you miss even an episode of certain television series. You feel lost. I was like, oh, they went into a church, huh? Is that a unexpected surprise, or was it just a progression that I could have predicted a week ago? Will it make a difference? Will it get people madder than ever about the same things they were mad about before? Yes. But the part that I did not anticipate with the so-called church thing was the Don Lemon comeback angle. Wherever he's been, I guess he's been podcasting or something, biding his time. He decided to really swing into action with this church thing. It's unclear if he was, tipped off or, embedded.
Well, that's become part of the funny after story of the whole thing, because after he was sort of threatened with prosecution or investigation, he said he had no affiliation with these folks, but he's, there are these videos where he's talking about how it's a secret thing, and we have to have white allies, and this is why I'm hanging out with these MAGA coded white people, because we're going to infiltrate this. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Don, I always call him Don Lemon for some reason. I can't. It feels funnier to me. He's become. He was previously a sort of a caricature of everything that staid, stuffy news was about, and now he's posing as this radical subversive and draping himself in and all in the garb of an SDS protester from 1967, and it's very bizarre. But anyway, let's look at the raw video. This is the city's church in St. Paul. There were two big incidents in St. Paul on Sunday at roughly the same time, and one of them became the story on X. The other became the story on Blue Sky. This is the X story, and there were about over 3 million posts about this within a day. It touched a big nerve. So let's just go to SOT 1 first, and it's a bunch of protesters who have decided to infiltrate a church, and the ostensible reason is that one of the pastors, this guy David Easterwood, is the acting field director for the St. Paul ICE office. Now that is true, but it doesn't appear that they actually knew that at the time. It was unconfirmed, but whatever.
Was he there? Was he at the service?
I've seen. I'm not sure actually. We'll have to take a look at that. But here's the basic video.
Renee Good! Renee Good! Renee Good! You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes, but what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino communities? All these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit. Is a preacher? Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No, Jesus would die with immigrants. You do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens. You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities? Why do I not see you out at Whipple every day protesting this attack on humanity? Where are you? You're sinners. You're pretending to be Christians. But we know you live an easy life, don't you? A very easy life while people are starving. Shame. Living real comfortable while the people starve. Living real comfortable while
That's
children
a
are
minivan,
dragged into
right?
concentration camps. You're all living real comfortable, aren't you? Shame on you. Do something. Stand with the Somalis. Stand with the Latinos. Quit ignoring this injustice. Why are you not going down to Whipple and joining us in protest against this inhumanity? You claim to be a Christian.
First of all, I'm with no absolute cause, none at all. I suspect that guy of being a Fed. He is so on the nose. His disguise is a beard. I've noticed over the years that federal agents who want to pose as the other side just grow a beard. And when the beard is your chief uniform or calling card, I wonder. He was so much more prominent than everybody else. He was so much more provocative. He calls himself something like woke farmer or something, and was
yeah, and he's got a fuck Trump hat that's like prominently displayed everywhere.
Right. He I think goes from protest to protest. He's a bit of a star. He's like Jackson Brown. He closes up the truck and goes on to another town for his next show. But I think he felt oddly over the top and on the nose. That's a completely useless, non-journalistic observation.
Yeah, I mean, look, the style of these actions has become very informed by a sort of new generation, a very media literate protester,
right?
And even though whenever anything happens, whenever there are tons of protesters on either the left or the right, we hear lots of stories about paid protesters. We hear lots of stories about sponsorship, affiliation. Those
double
are always,
agents.
Yeah, double agents. Those stories always are very tough. It's very elusive to actually prove those things.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows, but the fact that this was circulated so enthusiastically, in places that are not X, right, or on other parts of the social media landscape, is kind of amazing. Like, and the premise that these people all deserved it because one of their pastors works at is an ICE director. That's a kind of a dubious connection to me. I mean, it feels like, there's a whole bunch of things. We got to get into the whole legal spat also, because there is a law. God, I forget what it's called. It's something like facilitating access to clinic entrances.
The FACE Act.
The FACE Act, right? So I remember when they were debating this in the early 1990s. This was after there had been a number of incidents where people were not allowed to get into clinics, right? Or it's sort of the heckler's veto approach to direct action, where you're blocking entrances to things or shouting people down or threatening or whatever it is.
Mhm.
That same law has a passage in it that speaks directly to exercise of the First Amendment in pursuit of religious worship or religious expression. So it can be used in this circumstance. And all of these people were threatened with this afterwards. Now, before we get to that, though, here's Don Lemon in the middle of all of this, interviewing the pastor. Hang on a second, whose name I've blanked on, but I will get in a moment. And he's lecturing him a bit, basically about why this is okay, and it's kind of an amazing thing. If we can listen to it's number.
This is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship. So,
But there were folks who will.
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here. We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why we're here. That's what we're about.
Do you think Jesus would be understanding
We're about
and
worship.
love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a
No
Christian?
one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I ask that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to
Unless you're here to
chronicle what
worship.
happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Before you even get to something like the FACE Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does a person like him, like Don Lemon, not know that the First Amendment doesn't cover going into private property and stopping the exercise of the First Amendment in some other direction? I mean, that's two different things that are major parts of sort of free speech concepts. One is you can't break into somebody's private place and and obstruct, and the other one is shouting people down is not freedom of speech. Stopping what they're doing is not freedom of speech. That's the opposite. That's this whole heckler's veto concept, and people. It's amazing that he would pull that out in that situation, but
Don doesn't know much. Don doesn't try to learn much about what he doesn't know. He's a completely confident bullshit artist with a half-assed sense of what he's doing, and he couldn't have justified his presence more poorly in terms of the Constitution, but he did waive the Constitution in a very pious way, and he waived his own Christianity too. He's always worshiping. I didn't know that about him. That in some ways, when you see Don Lemon, you're seeing a man at prayer, no matter what he's doing. So. Hypocrisy is, the tribute that vice pays to virtue, and he reveres Christianity and he reveres the Constitution. He says that he's wrong about at least the Constitution, probably Christianity too. Doesn't seem to bother him. And why he kept his hat on, he wasn't. It's weird. He was there in church in this kind of guerrilla outfit. Take your damn hat off.
No, because you can't wear a suit. Remember, the other guy said that you can't be wearing suits.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay.
So we gotta dress down a little bit. I think, for the occasion.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if Don Lemon didn't exist, someone would have to write him. I mean, the level of cluelessness with that guy it's like off the charts. And then ever since this thing, bless you, by the way, ever since this scandal erupted, he just keeps doubling down in ways that are increasingly hilarious. I mean, the event itself is kind of upsetting on a number of levels, but it speaks to the level of desperation on not desperation, the level of intensity of the opposition, which is very real, right? From what we
okay. Number one, there were a couple of themes that they were pushing there. That one was race. They've apparently found a church with a largely white congregation. I'm sure they could have found many other kinds of churches in urban Minneapolis, from, all black to mixtures to some of these new sort of charismatic churches have a lot of immigrants in them, mixed with, residents of more traditional types. But they found one that they felt they could make a big rap about white and middle class or economic comfort. And they found those incompatible with Christianity for some reason, especially, having stuff and being comfortable and living well or something.
I mean, Christ said it was easier for, a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Okay. I mean, I
don't know that the people in that church qualify as the sort of rich people that Jesus was talking about. I mean, the rich people of the Bible times, were people with vast flocks and all kinds of, palaces and dancing girls and so on. I mean, I don't think he was talking about the middle class. It's easier for a middle class person to get to heaven.
A middle class Minnesotan to get into.
They didn't have much of a middle class back in Jerusalem in those days. But in any case, they came in with a rap on these people that didn't actually seem to have much to do with ICE. It had to do with race and having money. Now, Don Lemon, who has probably at least as much money as almost everyone in that church
combined.
He played the part. He read the script, and that farmer, who I think is the Ray Epps of the anti-ICE movement, had an interpretation of Christianity that if your clothes, fit and are dry, you're not a real Christian.
My favorite was him invoking Christ and then saying, "Touch me again, see what happens."
Right.
Like,
but what I'm saying is, there was an aspect of cultural revolution about all this that had nothing at all to do with ICE. They picked the target, and they picked their rhetoric as a way of doing this broad brush critique of white and, I guess, capitalist America. So I think they showed their hand there, what they're really upset about.
Yeah, comfortable white people who drink coffee, and I guess have jewelry, right? Like he was talking about those two sort of tween types who seem to be like between 13 and 16.
What's funny about that is that guy had apparently never been to a black church, because I can assure you that a lot of black churches include people dressed to the absolute nines,
absolutely,
to the highest possible standards, taking out the very best clothes from their wardrobe, the hats, the jewels, particularly the ladies. Yeah. Oh, are you going to wrap them for being well dressed at church? This was just a kind of standard social justice speechathon that used this church as a venue and used the ice adjacency as a very weak excuse to be in there.
Yeah, it was so tangential to the whole thing and the whole business about why aren't you out there right now at the Whipple building? You know, people are starving. Like, wait, what? You can't go to church right now because people are starving. I don't know. It's an
Are
interesting
they
thing.
starving? Are they
Well,
starving?
Somewhere
I mean,
they are.
somewhere in America or somewhere in the world, there's always people starving, but that hasn't been a big element of this story so far. That the immigrants are in Minneapolis are actually starving. Um, they're just kitchen sinking it, as the therapists say. Everything that goes into the kitchen sink that can go is going.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into this later. Not to get too heavy about it, but this was happening the day before Martin Luther King Day, right?
Mhm.
And when you think about how
He
first of
wore a
all,
suit. He wore suits to church, as I remember.
he looked fantastic
Yeah.
always, and one of his big ideas was that when you protest, you do it lovingly and openly, right? Like you don't go in sneering and jeering and full of yourself. But whatever. So that happened. We can come back to the premise of the protest in a moment. But
Matt, I have one question that in the reporting I've found confusingly answered. What denomination of church was it?
so that is a very good question. I saw it described in a number of different ways. When you look at the site, it doesn't identify itself as any one particular thing. It says we are Cities Church is a community of Christians who live as witnesses for Jesus in the Twin Cities. There's probably things, perhaps our Mr. Producer could tell us a little bit more about what denomination this is.
At points,
I saw it described as Lutheran by somebody, but I don't think that's right.
I saw it described as Southern Baptist. I saw it described as Lutheran. I doubt it's Lutheran. Lutheran being the sort of almost majority Protestant faith in Minnesota. It would not be so ambiguous as this one. And I've seen it described as a church affiliated with a
Southern
man named
Baptist.
Douglas Wilson, who is a religious leader based out in Idaho, who's controversial for all kinds of reasons. And I guess the reason I'm saying this was that in some accounts, the church is a right-wing Christian nationalist church.
Yeah, I don't know how they get that except by some demographic markers, but it's very strange. So it seems to be part of the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's loose. It doesn't seem like Southern Baptist churches that I've been to in the South, but whatever. You mentioned, by the way, black churches. You wouldn't pull this in a black church, by the way. Like I would be afraid. I would be afraid to pull this in a black church. That there's some places that you wouldn't want to mess with. Okay, so afterwards, Lemon had all kinds of things to say to everybody who gave him a hard time, and some people hit him below the belt. Invoked some gay slurs and that sort of thing. But he gave an interview with Jennifer Welch, about whom we've talked before, which is just it's like the most amazing thing. So let's go to let's start with 8 and 9. I think 10 is the best one, is the craziest one. But Um, this is him talking with Jennifer Welch about the reasons why he went there and why it was okay.
So that is one of those white evangelical churches that turn out to vote for Donald Trump 80+% of that sect of Christianity. These are the don't tread on me folks. These are the people who feel like America is
based on
for
what?
Americans and American only. These are white nationalists. And the DOJ got their panties in a wad because these protesters went straight to them and addressed their hypocrisy. You, a gay Black journalist, are, prime bait for them to drum up these charges. But so that's one issue. You went right into the most entitled white nationalists there are, and they feel that ICE is 100% justified. And this is an attempt to intimidate and beat you down.
Mm-hmm.
Has she ever heard of the
with
Episcopalians?
And
they're the
hear the first
entitled ones. Go to the Episcopalian church, my friend. Go to the Society Presbyterian Church.
Oh my! Well,
don't go to the meat and potatoes evangelical church that doesn't look like it even has a purpose-built church building, but maybe kind of, I don't know.
No, in the few Episcopalian services that I've been to in New England, it's like you would need two anuses to get in. Like it's that tight in there. But anyway, but that's not to denigrate all Episcopalians. Right. There's nothing, but her point is just ridiculous as a generalization. And what's it based on? Again, this is the kind of thing.
She got the nationalists very fast on her staircase of condemnation. What she went from white to something and then got to Christian nationalists.
Yeah, they vote for Trump 80%, and
they're entitled too, which is what's interesting. I guess they didn't necessarily earn their money, whatever it is that they have. They just kind of appropriated it, or they're entitled. What? Since when is that language germane to middle class people in America?
Well,
entitled.
But we don't. That whole idea that some people actually work for a living and they make money has disappeared.
They're entitled to earn a paycheck.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hear what the rest of what he says here, and then go to the next one though.
But I think that there is obviously there's racism in it. The whole point of it is that they're detaining people on the streets because of accents and the color of their skin, and they're also targeting people of color and Black people as well as brown people. So there is a certain degree of racism there, and there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are in the religious groups like that,
they're talking about the church members,
but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy.
From supremacy.
Okay.
Dude, these people are idiots. They don't link any two of their charges, except in the sense that they're often, entitled and nationalist, and white are often found in the same propaganda sheets, but they didn't prove anything there. Did they do a sociological survey of this church before they just picked it out? Do they know it's, the mean income or whatever? And it all comes from supremacy. See, it derives from that.
The supremacy, I guess, is in the reaction to the story. It's so completely like out of your mind crazy.
They're just libeling away. They really are.
Yeah.
And there's no limit as to what they feel they can charge them with. They're obviously racist. She set up Don with the gay Black identity so that, it wasn't like they dragged him into the church. He went there voluntarily in some capacity. is he saying that he was there to cover the thing or to lead it? I'm still not sure.
Oh, no. We're getting to that because he has to disavow it in a moment. But
they seem like they treated him pretty well. I didn't hear him screaming at, him for being gay or black or whatever it was.
Not at the church, no. But, like Nicki Minaj flamed him, for instance, right? Like, and there was a big thing about that. But now he's going to talk. Let's go to 9 because this is interesting. This is his reason why he's been targeted by the government.
It's an intimidation tactic. And, I said, I don't understand how I've become the face of it when I was a journalist. I do understand that I'm the biggest name there. And I'm also, as I was on with my producers this morning, you and Kylie talk all the time.
Get to know me.
Were saying,
Don
I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America.
Right.
And you have a platform. And you're the biggest name. Of course, you're going to be the person that they single out and they're going to make the headline because it plays to their base. And their base is full of racist, bigoted homophobes like Nicki Minaj, by the way.
Oh, Nicki Minaj is part of the base of this church, of these evangelical. What?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled over that one too. Like, what? Is Nicki Minaj the new face of
white racism?
Yeah,
and Christian nationalism. But the main thing was they didn't pick you out, Don.
I know you picked them out.
You picked them out. You went there. There wasn't a big panoply of other media figures to choose from. You weren't singled out. My God, you sitting there in your, fashion sweatshirt and your glasses and so on. You're not vibing man of the people to me, Don. You don't seem like you came out of the hood, burning for social justice. You just seem like a kind of half-employed influencer with a big bank account who decided to get some relevance.
Hey, now wait a minute. Now you're starting to strike a little close to home with that description. No, I'm kidding. Okay. So she basically Nicki called him. She called him a cocksucker. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So she said we should. I want that thug in jail. He would never do that to any other religion. Lock him up. But the idea that he's now the victim is kind of amazing. Now, okay, here he is at a church. It's the church, right, Mr. Producer? Yes. Let's go to SOT 10. Yeah.
I feel violated. I feel interrupted. I feel angry. On one side are people who watched a previous administration bring 12 million people in over the course of 4 years. I'm saying this is a part of a much larger dialogue in which one administration caused a great deal of chaos and havoc and danger for American citizens, and another is trying to correct that.
Do you believe that? Why? Honestly,
Okay.
let me talk you
Listen,
just on the
you're not a
facts.
journalist.
Yes, I am. I want to give you the facts.
No.
Did you know that undocumented people and
we're
immigrants
done. We're
commit
done.
far less crime
We're done.
than American citizens?
We're done here. We're done here.
Than natural-born Americans? You won't listen.
If you could ask,
I'm
an
giving you the
objective
facts.
question
It
and not
is.
Give me facts. I would have a conversation.
But I can respond to you.
No, we're done.
Did
Jesus stand with you? Okay?
Because he doesn't want to listen to facts.
That's it.
That's the interesting thing about this is that they won't listen to facts.
Oh my God!
No.
You won't.
Take your
because-
sunglasses
When you
off.
because
pose
it's
as a journalist,
I am a
and you
journalist.
ask me
Journalists give
questions,
facts.
and then you start correcting me with facts and don't have.
You shouldn't hear the facts.
Of course,
That
I should
most
hear
of the
the
people
facts.
who are picked up
But
are
will you
not.
give me the
have no-
facts on both sides?
That is the facts on both sides.
What the hell? Don, you are a pest. You're a big pest. You're a big dummy. You are dressed poorly. You should not be wearing sunglasses in church. If you are such a respectful Christian and all these other things, and a constitutional defender and so on, show a little respect for these people. They didn't go to church this morning thinking they were going to be the subject of guerrilla interviews from some freak dressed like, I don't know,
or just any interviews, right? Like you're in church, I
mean, take your damn jacket off. You know what? You're actually preying on poor people is what you're doing. I bet that fellow doesn't have the money you do. I bet most of them don't. You're intimidating and bullying people in a place where they go for reasons you haven't even asked. Maybe their mother died last week and they're saying a prayer for her eternal soul. Maybe their son has cancer and they're saying a prayer for his recovery. Maybe they are people who have had difficult lives and fixed them with religious philosophy and are attempting to recover from drug and alcohol addiction. You don't know where you are. You are being absolutely rude to people at the most serious moment of their week. And you have tried to turn everything about them into some monstrous right-wing Trump-adjacent phenomena when in fact they're at a spiritual ceremony. And that's the fact, Don.
Right. If this whole thing were an interview with Easterwood, who actually works at ICE, and I still wouldn't be in favor of going in. I mean, you can't go into somebody's church. It's like, like if you break into somebody's house, wake them up in the middle of the night, tap them on the shoulder, and start yelling at them, and they say, "Hey, what are you doing?" You can't say, "Hey, have you heard of the First Amendment?" That's not how it works. You can't just go in and start doing that. But
he drove him out of his own church.
Well, right, and then the amazing thing about that exchange is that it showed what's happened to the whole concept of journalism in this time period, because it's the same as Congress. It's the same thing that you saw in Congress. It's the same thing that I saw in Congress. People are not there to be interviewed. They're not there to be asked questions. They're there as props. That's it.
Matt, did you see one iota of journalism in any of that? I didn't. He asked leading questions. He made accusations, veiled and direct. He asked no questions about what was going on. He didn't attempt to learn anything about the church, the people, what they believe, etc. He came in there to bug people, and with his completely half-baked notions about how things work. That wasn't journalism. That was a kind of it wasn't journalism in the sense that it did not yield information. It did not even seek information. It was a kind of like rolling trial that came rolling into that church, and they put the people on trial for crimes of sensibility, crimes of
demographic crimes, really. Yeah,
demographic crimes.
Yeah, I mean the only
it was like the
thing...
Inquisition. It was the woke Inquisition comes to that church.
And I think the almost universal reaction to this everywhere not everywhere. Oddly enough, like in other places, the reaction was mainly to criticize people in the church. But this whole thing, the idea of actually asking people questions. He did ask the one question, right? He asked the pastor, Jonathan, I think his name is Parnell, right? Is the first guy he talked to. What do you think about this, right? And
what do you think about what?
About us being here, yeah. And when the guys said it's outrageous and it's unacceptable, that's when he started throwing the whole thing about the First Amendment at him. So he asked him one question, but
What do you think? What do you think? Here's journalism nowadays. I'm going to step on your foot. How does that feel? Do you like it? I mean,
Right.
he asked him a question about a staged intrusion, and he was supposed to say what? Oh, I think it's wonderful. We've never had this before, but now that it's happened, I think we should do it all the time.
Yeah, and it's too bad, because it would actually be incredibly interesting, and maybe I'll even go out to Minnesota and go to that church and ask some of those folks what they actually think about all kinds of things, because I would bet almost any amount of money that there's a variety of opinions in there that do not match up with what they think of those people.
You know, church services end. People file out, they shake hands with the pastor, and they walk to their cars. If they wanted to interview them, they could have done it at that point. That would have been the civilized way to find out what's going on in that church. They didn't want to know what was going on. They wanted to disrupt it, and they wanted to get people's reaction. And they were hoping somebody might say something really crude about Don, maybe, or who knows,
or immigrants.
But you know, being a Minnesotan, they're not going to have much luck with that, even in rather right-wing circles, because it's the damned politest place on God's green earth.
Yeah,
and seeing those people.
This isn't
polite,
West Texas, where you know,
seeing those people be Minnesota polite to these goofballs who they can't even. I mean, they must have looked around and not known what the heck was going on. Was another shoe going to drop? Was it just going to be this lame say her name, or were more people headed in, or were they going to commandeer the pulpit and start ranting? I actually got a text from a friend of mine here in Livingston who had a relative at the church, young man, and he ran to the aid of some girls who were praying, apparently, and were very upset, and sort of stood over them and, you know, gave them a feeling of security while all this was going on, because I don't think we have a very clear picture of how long it lasted, what was going on in the different corners of the room, whether some people were fearful.
I think it was 20 minutes. My understanding is that's roughly how long it took.
There were children there, by the way.
Yeah. There was a scene of one. Well, there were some upset children, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there were children, by the way. I'm sure it wasn't what they expect at church, and they were rather frightened. Frightening children, Don, and cornering innocent people who might be in the middle of major life events and are seeking spiritual solace. Way to go, you dick.
Yeah. And before I move on to a couple other things, I mean, like, I wanted to tell, I think I may have told this story before, but I once was at a Republican campaign event in Utah. I think this was in 2008. It was the McCain race, right? And there was something about gay marriage. Remember, gay marriage was still kind of a hot issue at the time, and there was an elderly couple, and they were against gay marriage, and you know, working at Rolling Stone, it was ingrained in me to ask the question, well, do you know any gay people? Right? Like, I was being kind of a dick about it, right? Like,
Right.
You know, even though I was doing the job of asking the questions, I was trying to corner them a little bit, and figure out, you know, what the basis of their opinion was. And they just went into this long soliloquy about how, yes, they have they have a number of gay people who are not only friends of theirs, but in their family, that it's a major issue, that the couple had debated that this was something they had prayed over. They struggled with it. They resented the idea of being asked a yes or no question about something that they took that was so difficult for them.
Right.
And I remember afterwards feeling like, oh my God, like, I feel kind of like shit about this. I mean, and that's what happens when you start asking people questions, when you have preconceived notions of what people are going to say. Often they will tell you what you expect to hear, but often it's not the case too, right? That's why this kind of thing is so offensive.
Matt, I mean, as an aside, for years as a journalist, especially when I was working at GQ magazine, because I lived in Montana, I was given assignment after assignment, which was basically go find the heart of fascist darkness in America and bring it to our readers.
Well, right.
And so on one occasion, I was sent to a place called Beulah Bible College in, I think it's Laguna Beach. It's in Orange County, California. And Beulah is a very Christian, very observant college. And it has an incredibly strict moral code for students. Dating and dress and shows of public affection and so on are very constrained there. Anyway, I was supposed to come back and do a story about all these crazy virgin nutcase evangelicals. Well, of course, I got to know them. And I remember I sat down in one guy's room, and he had a stencil, a cardboard stencil that he had placed over the cover of GQ because it had Jennifer Aniston in like a bathing suit or something, and they weren't allowed to look at that. Man. And I remember talking to one of them, and I said, "How you don't believe in sex before marriage? Where does that come from?" And he says, "Because I want sex to be so damn good on my wedding night." He said, "It's going to blow my mind when me and my wife, after that wedding ceremony, are finally alone and finally have sex. It's going to be awesome." And I remember I said, "Well, what if it isn't?" But the fullness of the reporting caused me to realize that I was dealing with young people who had all kinds of ideas about, sex, love, other things. And they were, in a way, sweet. And they were trying their best to figure out, has anybody in the society figured out the best way to deal with the opposite sex and marriage and, and so on? They were doing their thing. They were very sincere. They had ideas that old Walt, the roue, thought might cause a little disappointment later, like, let's just wait and know nothing about sex till the wedding night and all the fireworks are going to go off.
Right.
But I came back and I said, I can't make fun of these people. I mean, they're human beings and they're sweet and they have been taught certain things and they have certain points too. They're not going to get VD.
That's true, right?
They're not going to get pregnant and have their college career fall apart. But it was over and over that kind of thing. And no, I think journalistic hit piece, if it's properly done, really survives talking to the sources and getting to know them as human beings. And that's why I resent so much this absolute cookie cutter. We're going to sweep in, and despite the evidence before our eyes, we're going to come out with a total verdict on all these people and all their beliefs and their role in society, and we won't let the evidence get in our way.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of that comes, frankly, from J School. When we look at the best American journalists, the whole tradition of laugh at the hayseed journalism is such a tradition in 20th century journalism. Ever since H.L.
Scopes monkey trial.
The Scopes monkey trial, which, by the way, even though it is viciously lacerating about the locals and all the whooping and hollering that they do, there are a number of passages in there where he talks about where Mencken talks about being surprised by how charming the town is and how pleasant the people are, and in their own way dignified, right? Like there are passages like that,
right?
But the cliche that came out of those reports, which they're great mainly just because Mencken is a great writer. I mean, if you put him writing about city people, and he did do that, he's just as funny. But this whole thing, as you said, we would get dispatched to find the dumbest person in Middle America. There was a museum in Kentucky, the Museum of Creation, where they had they had created like some kind of a display that showed Adam and Eve like with the dinosaurs at the same time, and so Charles Pierce, I went there, and then I heard, when I got there, I heard stories about all the famous like New York journalists who had already been there, like Charlie Pierce had been there, and I was too embarrassed to put that in my piece, but it's just not right, and as you say, like once you start talking to people, you find out that even when you don't agree with them, sometimes, very often, you like them for other reasons, or they're sincere, or whatever it is. Anyway, this
I learned nothing about that church from any of this. I learned nothing about the people in it. All I got was a wholesale condemnation in the most stereotypical terms, which was baked in because they chose the church for certain reasons, obviously. They did not want a black church. They did not want a mixed church. And the takeaway for the movement, I guess, for the anti-ICE movement in Minneapolis, or what's its final, what's the effect of this action? They looked like they were seeking trouble rather than in the middle of it. They looked like they were causing trouble rather than standing on the barricades. It's one thing to be in a scramble and in a scrum, where there's ICE agents on the street and this and that and lines of protesters and so on. That feels dramatic and confrontational and something. But like to go seek out a peaceful place where people are minding their own business and, go stomping into it, made me think they are doing something other than protesting ICE. They're trying to get eyeballs. They're trying to revive attention on what I think is not a real bonfire of a protest. It's not spreading nationally. It's not. The whole thing seems to have kind of reached a simmer, and there are, outbreaks, but it's Minnesota specific largely, and they did themselves no favors whatsoever. There are people who think that they need the energy and the attention to keep their, to keep their presence in the news. I guess they did succeed in that.
Yeah, and as we'll learn, one of the consequences of this is that there are, I think, 1,500 more troops on standby waiting to go in as a result of this. But
the church incident itself triggered a larger deployment than otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Well, we'll check in on that in a minute. Let's move for a second to the other big story that happened at almost exactly the same time, and has been almost the exclusive focus of like Blue Sky folks, right? So just to give an example, like the number of people on X who watched that story versus this one, you know, it was about a factor of 100, right? You had like about 3 million posts or 2.5 million posts versus 2,600 or something like that about this story. Now, this story is about a 57-year-old man who's Hmong, and, you know, from northern Laos, that small minority that if you've ever seen the movie Gran Torino, right? You know, and they've been in that part of the country for generations, but the ICE agents went into the house, and let's just watch the story. This is SOT 15. Actually, yeah, let's go with SOT 15. It's the local Fox affiliate, but you get most of the video.
Okay.
Our top story at 6, viral videos taken yesterday show federal agents taking an older man out of his St. Paul home wearing nothing but shorts and a blanket.
Fox 9's Corin Hoggard spoke with the family, observers who documented this encounter, and the mayor of St. Paul, who has been speaking publicly about it.
An unexpected door repair had to happen Monday at the St. Paul home, where federal agents broke it down Sunday. Observers recorded most of the action and eventually saw ICE leading away a Hmong man in clothes not fit for a 7-degree morning.
What we saw was this little elderly man wearing shorts and Crocs with a blanket, and he just looked broken. You know, it was horrible.
Observers say they heard people asking whether agents had a judicial warrant and why they took the man into custody, but most of all, why they wouldn't let him get some clothes.
I was just really scared for him.
Family members say the man is Chong Lee Scott Tao. ICE drove him around for about an hour, then let him go. He's a U.S. citizen whose mother was one of the first nurses treating American service members injured during the secret war in Laos more than 50 years ago. That's where his family forged a relationship with the family of new St. Paul Mayor Kali Her. She visited with Tao's family Monday and heard his side of the story.
They didn't ask for ID. They didn't ask for to verify if it was the right person. Like, they didn't do any of those things. They literally broke into this home, grabbed the people.
Federal agents circled the neighborhood again on Monday with 3 vehicles driving past the home at least 5 times. ICE didn't answer any of our questions about the detention, but Homeland Security released a statement saying they detained him while looking for 2 convicted sex offenders. Quote, the U.S. citizen lives with these 2 convicted sex offenders at the site of the operation. The individual refused to be fingerprinted or facially ID'd. He matched the description of the targets, end quote.
That statement makes me livid, because those sex offenders, we should absolutely get people who have broken the law, who've hurt other people. Those people do not live in this household with them. They are not a part of this family. That for ICE to put out a statement like that is irresponsible and it is reckless.
Mayor Her says she's talked to a lot of Hmong Americans since this surge starts, and they're telling her they're more fearful now during the ICE surge than they were in Laos more than 50 years ago when they were fighting communists. In St. Paul, Corin Hoggard, Fox 9.
Okay, so there's a lot to dive into with this story. It was everywhere. The 57-year-old man, Chong Lee, I believe he calls himself Scott or Sally. It was 14 degrees Fahrenheit out when they came in. Now you saw that there's a lot of things that make me very nervous about this. Busting in the door. It doesn't appear that they had a warrant. He reportedly went and hid in the bathroom. They didn't ask him for ID. Apparently, that's one of the reports. And that's why he was taken out so quickly. Now, I did hear one person explain that one of the reasons these operations have been happening like this is that ICE is anxious to get out of areas quickly. with all when they're surrounded by protesters. But
Mhm.
I'm sorry, if you're fully armed, you got your hands on weapons, and you probably should have a minute to ask for somebody for ID and let them get dressed. And they took this guy out, got him in the car. It's interesting they said he wasn't fingerprinted in that story, because other reports say he was fingerprinted, and that's how they eventually realized that they had the wrong person and brought him back about an hour later. And according to the man, they didn't apologize. And there's a lot of people who are very upset about the whole thing for a variety of reasons. The one thing, if there is a mitigating factor to this story, and the only thing is they released that wanted poster about two people who were convicted sex offenders who were being targeted for deportation. The notion that they lived with those people might just be wrong. Like it was originally just denied. Then a bunch of people, including Reuters, quoted members of the family as saying one of those people did live in that house just before they moved in. So, you go in without a warrant. You don't let the person get dressed. The whole fit the description thing. It fits a lot of tropes that evoke bad memories, right? And you take an old man out in freezing weather without clothes on. That's going to do a lot of damage, I think, to the image of these operations, and especially in a community that has a reputation for being very patriotic. They were virulently anti-communist, right, when they came here. So
that's why they're here.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They were brought back by the U.S. military in the way, Afghans have been brought back. They cooperated in our secret war in the mountains. When I lived in Minnesota, there were a lot of Hmong already in place, and they're well, at the risk of sounding superficial, and the Hmong in Minnesota are a rather insular community. They have dietary and spiritual practices which are not common to Minnesota, such that they sort of cluster around these traditions. They're great farmers. They have a great talent for taking. They can put chicken wire around 3 square yards of wild land, and they do it all the time alongside the road, and grow a panoply of vegetables.
Because where they come from, the farming is incredibly difficult, right?
Yes, and in my time in Minnesota, the Hmong were sometimes objects of curiosity for people who couldn't penetrate their community. They would slaughter certain animals in certain ways that the sensibilities of the normie American might be slightly offended by. But in general, there was a very good relationship between the community at large and the Hmong people. Minnesota was actually quite proud to be a host to them. There's also a community here in Montana, up near Missoula. Ice fucked up,
Yeah, and
they fucked up,
and it makes you wonder about the whole operation. Like, why are you bursting into a home, right? If you're looking for a specific person, and knock on the door and find out, it might be that the people there will tell you, maybe they won't, but at minimum, if you are looking for two actual real sex offenders, you got to be sure that they're there. You got to go by the book. You got cameras on you everywhere. The last thing you can do is just go bursting into a home of a middle class or family, drag out a grandfather in Crocs in the middle of winter, and then treat them not so great even afterward, right? Like, you sort of drop them off, you leave the family pissed. Now they're talking to press everywhere. And they're giving quotes that are very damaging. I mean, that was a Fox affiliate saying, we feel the family feels more afraid of ICE than they did of the communists. Like, that hurts, right? Like that. But it's fascinating that really that is the story that happened on Sunday for one part of America, and the city's church incident is what happened for another part of the country. And there's really almost no intersection anymore. Like it's like the two groups don't even overlap that much. So it's
well, I would hope that ICE, which must have some community relations element to its to its contingent, would go visit things, visit this family, try to make things right, and do a little bit better job of explaining what their criteria for sudden breaking down of doors is, and not just in this case, but in general, and own it,
Yeah. It's a bad look. But if you watch the way the sort of second generation reaction to these stories happen, like the social media reaction was immediately like they're targeting Hmong people generally.
Well, that would surprise me, because the Hmong come from an earlier wave of immigration, and as I think we've both alluded to, they were here kind of as allies of the U.S. military, who had proven their loyalty to American forces, and were often brought back by officers who had worked with local militias and so on, and wanted to see their guys come back to the United States. So that there are a lot of them without papers would surprise me. That there are a lot of them without some formal immigration status that is the result of this
refugee program.
Yes, refugee program would surprise me.
Yeah, that's why to Sterling Cooper 3978, Matt wants illegals. This is a naturalized American that this happened to. It's an American citizen, and that's what they're trying to avoid doing, right? An American citizen doesn't, you just as you can't, Don Lemon can't burst into a church and shut down a church service. ICE can't just break your door down and yank you out in your underwear without a warrant. They may be able to do that with a non-citizen.
Well, I'll tell you what, just from the sort of common sense and man on the street perspective, the Hmong of St. Paul are perhaps a little enigmatic to just your normal walking around Minnesotan who's lived there for a long time, but they are respected. They are their prowess as gardeners is respected. They are not associated with crime or social disorder. They're a little mysterious, as I say. I think for language reasons and cultural reasons, there's less interaction than there might be. But the Hmong have a pretty damn good reputation and have been welcomed in Minnesota. And, you know, somebody needs to point out with this big anti-church business, the people who bring refugees to America tend to be churches.
It's true.
Okay.
It's true. Religious organizations, absolutely.
And in Minnesota, it's the Lutheran Social Services that does, you know, a huge amount of that, and did it in the case of the Hmong, and I'm sure it's done it in the case of Somalians. So once again, it's a little more complex than they want us to have it seem. I would be shocked and disappointed if ICE is targeting the Hmong population of St. Paul, which has yet to appear in these giant frauds or these other, you know, dicey legal situations that we've seen some of the other immigrant communities stained by. So I'm all for the Hmong.
Yeah.
Apologize to them, reassure them, and thank them for not going crazy over this and trying to do better.
Okay, couple of folks I want to answer. Colleen Myers, Matt, you're overlooking the idea that even some in the press are saying, yes, sex offenders did live there at one point, maybe now as well. No, I actually mentioned that that among other things, like Reuters quoted family members talking about how at least one of the people they were looking for did live there at one point. Okay, a number of people brought this up. 1 in thousands. Who cares? The big picture is way, way, way more important than individual cases.
Well, that's true. Policing, you know, unfortunately, is a chaotic business. You know, you're dealing with people who you don't have good descriptions of. Sometimes you fear they're going to flee. You fear that their friends or somebody sympathetic is going to ambush them. If you really believe there are sex offenders there, you're not sure how desperate they might be to resist being caught. There's a lot of confusion, and sometimes things go wrong. It seems like they did in this case. Why is it important to make a little bit more of a big deal about this one incident than it is than is warranted statistically? Because that's what we're trying to do here, is preserve our souls while a policy that was voted on by the American people rather roundly and was resulted in Donald Trump's election to the presidency is carried out in a fashion that we can all feel, whether we agree with it or not, was humane.
So the idea that this happens all the time, like this happens in law enforcement, that actually is true, but that I don't know that that's a positive. Like, you know, when I was covering police abuse cases, I kept running into these 18 and 19-year-old dudes in New York who would tell me the same story. Like, yeah, I got pulled over and I had my pants pulled completely down, and had my, you know, private parts fondled in the middle of the street, as you know, I was searched for drugs. And for a while I was like, okay, some of these people have to be making up these stories. Eric Garner actually was one of those people. He filed a complaint about this, but then it turns out there was a class action lawsuit in which 100,000 pretrial detainees were illegally strip searched. The city had to settle. There was a similar number of people who were strip searched outside the confines of like the penitentiary system. So the thing about dragging people out half naked or like not being respectful about how people are dressed and everything, I get that it happens, but I think it happens too much, right?
Well, all law enforcement and sort of federal peacekeepers have their weak spots and their sadistic even individuals. And I can tell you over the years, my stories about TSA and others stories,
oh my God, yeah,
will tell you that in the isolation rooms of the TSA facilities at various airports, strip searches and indignities and awful shit goes down a lot, usually out of view of cameras, by the way. And I have all too personal experience with some of this, let's put it that way. And so we don't argue that we shouldn't have airport security, but we do want to be sure that in these interactions, we are a country of laws and a country of decency, consonant with carrying out these missions in a way that's effective and legal.
Yeah. Okay.
America didn't vote for people to be dragged out onto the street in their PJs. America voted for
American citizens, by the way. Yeah.
America voted for an aggressive, I would say, given the numbers, it would have to be aggressive, and substantial deportation of illegal immigrants, beginning with those who have committed crimes. That was what was promised, and to the extent that that's what's being carried out, you can say America voted for it.
Yeah. Either way, I don't think that incident helps, but it's also some of the reporting about it, I think, was a little weird because it suggested that this was happening all the time, and that American citizens were being detained quite a lot.
And there's this refrain going around that everybody's ending up in concentration camps.
Well, yeah, that was in the one of the people in the church thing, which is anyway. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't seem to be absolutely crystalline in its accuracy. There are places where people go before they are deported. There are detention facilities for people awaiting deportation. They actually exist inside federal buildings right in New York City. I've seen them. When I married a foreign national back in the 80s. And
I didn't know this story. Okay, but go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, there was a guy in front of me pleading his case, and he wasn't liked, and he got a little loud, and they put him in the jail right there in the federal building. In general, I think we mentioned this once before. We talked about it. The execution of immigration law on the ground level is kind of tough to watch, even when it's happening inside facilities like downtown Manhattan, where you come and have these little interviews and you wait in long lines, and sometimes you don't go home a free man from that building.
Oh, I know. And that's been another frustrating aspect to all of this. Like, for the people who are 100% opposed to these actions, and there are a lot of things about them that give me pause, but one of them isn't that this is new. I mean, we've been doing this stuff forever. People have been whose immigration statuses unclear or who don't have the right papers, you get in a bar fight in LA. I mean, I remember interviewing a family to whom this happened. Dad gets in a fight, disappears. They never hear from him again. They live, you know, you don't get to find out. There's no phone call. In the Obama years, they started introducing this thing where you would get a tracking number like you would for a UPS package that would tell you roughly where your relative was, but you didn't get to talk to them.
Right.
And
it's a different body of law. I mean, it
is
a different body of law, different rights, different practices, different traditions, different statutes, I guess.
Yeah, and they don't have the same rights that an American citizen does in terms of full due process, right? Like you're not allowed, the full spectrum of Bill of Rights protections, even though there are some Supreme Court cases that say that you are. It's a brutal business. Like they can do random car stops or it's not even clear that they can do it. They do it in states all over the country, including some of the some places that are sanctuary cities. They've been doing, they've done this over the years, and they'll grab people up and they'll never come back. And so it's not a new phenomenon. So anyway,
one last thing. Somebody commented that the ICE agents are now in a never-ending hostile environment in Minnesota in particular. And I guess that can get to people after a while. We know that when you are besieged and you are a platoon of law enforcement people who feel maybe susceptible to real attack that might harm you and so on, you tend to bond, you tend to become a football team. It's almost it can become a kind of warlike, I suppose, exercise. One of the deleterious effects of this constant confrontation, I think, is that the ICE people are being forced into an insular, defensive, and uncomfortable position. They want to not let them sleep at night in their hotels. They don't want them to be able to go down the street. If they see them in a restaurant, I don't know where they eat, if they just eat in mess halls or if they're allowed to go out in restaurants. They've been doxxed. They're afraid for their families.
Yeah. And we talked to Ford live last week, right? And this week he's told us, we just published an interview with him yesterday, talking about how there's one place that a lot of businesses have closed because they don't want to deal with the disorder. He said, I've had dinner at a handful of restaurants, blah, blah, blah. Many people are afraid to go outside, fearing interaction with ICE, regardless of immigration status. The two exceptions have been hotel restaurants and a business I won't name here, positioned close to the Whipple building. So clearly, just being open to maybe providing some kind of financial or business transaction to ICE personnel has become disqualifying.
Well, I mean, if you are even a member of a church, your whole church has communal guilt of some kinds, apparently. I have seen stories of the protesters setting upon people who either they think are ICE or they think are sympathetic to them, and in other words, extending their harassment to other than the actual uniformed agents. That weighs against them.
Yeah. We should try to find this video, by the way. The Alter 54 is talking about the guy who was forced to take off his sweatshirt. This is becoming a thing. And as a result of that, the government is not behaving the way police forces do, to local police forces typically do in a crisis. They usually go into a shell, wait for the settlement to happen when they do something bad, and then they just keep going out and kicking ass on the streets. The Trump administration is not doing that. They're responding to each one of these incidents, like this church incident, by escalating. Oh, is this the sweatshirt incident? Let's take a look at this.
You're not going to take it off if you are hurt. Take it off. Now, butt. Take it off. You gave me a chance. There you go. I got you. You're good. Get your ass up out of here. Drop it. Drop it. I gave you a chance. Good.
All right. Like,
vigilante dress code enforcers, huh?
Yeah.
The thing that in all of these cases strikes me over and over is that Minnesota, at least in this part, and Minneapolis, I know some of this happened in St. Paul, doesn't appear to have local police that actually do anything. They have cleared out. They're at the edges. They could mitigate some of this. They could be a third force. I don't approve of things like seeing school children marched around. Apparently, there are schools out for certain districts. Supposedly, from the beginning, it was thought that kids shouldn't have to go to school in this atmosphere. I don't know why. And I may be mistaken, but it seems there have been large groups of children who sort of marched along in concert with adults protesting. I don't like that. I feel that the Cultural Revolution penumbra around this whole thing is bothersome. Why patriotic shirts should be, and why Christianity and why going to church should all somehow, attach like burrs to the question of ICE's behavior. It feels like an attempt to widen the revolution, and that bothers me.
It does, and again, yesterday was a national holiday celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. We don't want to do the thing where we say what we think Martin Luther King would have favored or what he wouldn't have, but my understanding of nonviolent resistance, when I was growing up, didn't involve guilt by association for sure, or kids, or guilt because of racial identity or anything like that. Like, at the same time,
or bringing religion into it.
Now, we can also imagine, King. I find it hard to imagine him approving of the ICE raids as they've been conducted. But
well, I don't really, that's a good question, Matt. I don't really know. I mean, Cesar Chavez, the organizer of agricultural workers in California, was active at a time. I don't know how much he overlapped with King's time, but there were various civil rights movements for, at least seasonal labor in California going on. I don't know what he thought about that. there tends to be a kind of solidarity across these issues. But the thing that is distinctive about King is that by the time he was killed in Memphis, where he had gone to speak for the garbage workers who were striking, he was kind of yesterday's man in terms of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was remembered as, that peaceful kind of guy in a suit who wanted to do it all the right way. But by the time he went to Memphis, the Black Panthers, Malcolm X, Malcolm X's movement, and other more radical protest groups had kind of eclipsed him, and he was kind of trying to get back the initiative in a way, I think, by going to Memphis, where he was killed. And we don't have a figure like that. We haven't kind of had a figure since him like that. And he too, as I say, was sort of edged out by the more radical, activist, dramatic, street confrontation types.
Yeah, the radical chic, movements, right? I mean, he talked about that in one of his essays. I can't remember which one. He talked about struggling to find that right place between, the cynicism of, the violent exercise of state power and the cynicism of, the Black Muslims and sort of race-based, like racial power movements, right? He was against that, and it was a tough thing for him. He had lost a lot of credibility, some of the luster had gone off of him. But the reason I wanted to bring him up is because, he was a deeply religious person, and I can't imagine the idea that we don't respect people who worship, or even if we ourselves aren't religious. It's just such a different thing from when we were younger. We had reverence for people who were actually in the church and were sincere believers and took their faith seriously.
We also have to remember that what Martin Luther King was calling for was the application of the law, the upholding of the law that was not being vigorously and equally enforced. Martin Luther King was not calling for the destruction of the system. He was calling for the system to be worthy and effective and equally and even handedly applied in ways that it had not been. And by that time, certain laws had changed. They'd managed to get some of them changed, but it was not a movement of anarchy. It was a movement of challenging the country to live up to its promises, and be honest about its failures, and create a new compact out of what was already kind of existing law that wasn't being taken seriously. It wasn't a tear down America movement.
I mean, his last, on the night of, before he died, that was one of the last things he said was, all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. Right. In fact, Greg, if you can find that the ending of that April 3rd, 1968 speech, it wouldn't hurt to spend 2 minutes on Martin Luther King Jr. just because that's such an amazing thing. But just to follow the thought of why he would be such a great figure to have in this moment. It's because we don't have anybody. We don't have a leader who's able to bridge this gap between the unbelievable like materialism and cynicism of one side and the kind of loss of faith and the belief that government force is going to solve our problems, or I don't know. It feels like there's nobody who has the moral authority to talk to both sides of the aisle right now. And
well, in this case, but you see, you got a sticky situation here, because in this case the law is clear. The rights of the federal government to carry out the law are not in question, and the plebiscite that led to this enforcement was definitive. This is a different kind of movement. It's not a liberation movement. It's not a civil rights movement in the traditional sense. It's using some of the imagery and some of the tactics, I suppose, and so on. But these people strike me as something else. They're kind of annoying people who have hostile relations with all kinds of things American that don't relate to the cause at hand. And they are they're not very disciplined in some way. I think their lack of discipline in going into this church, in starting in with this white supremacy and Christian nationalist rhetoric, and in bothering people for what they're wearing, and sort of becoming an anti-patriotic or anti-American movement in general, is going to dissipate. Not just sympathy, but maybe even their effectiveness, because apparently ICE is taking a lot of people out of Minnesota. I saw some figure that, just in the past few days, 3,000 or something like that. Did you see that? They're not really stopping them.
Right. Yeah, and that's not. King saw political activism as a performance that was designed, that was meant to morally make your political opponent unsure, morally unsure, and feel paralyzed, and to weaken their resolve, and to question themselves. And that's exactly what you don't do when you barge into a church and insult a bunch of people who are sitting and just praying. They become more hardened in their conviction. Just to respond to the person who said King was trying to change laws, dummy. Yes, he agonized over the idea of like what laws were just and which ones were unjust. He spent a lot of time on that question. But as we'll see in this video, as Walter said, his whole his ultimate point was we want the law to, we want all the privileges that the law says we're owed, right? And that's what he says in this speech. And this is fascinating for a number of reasons. I always get chills up my spine when I watch this, because this was the night before he died, and the thing he talks about at the end is just so incredible. But anyway, let's listen.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now.
This is the part that blows me
We've
away.
got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Anyway, yeah, we can stop there.
Boy,
How-
anybody in our audience who has not been to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis has foregone a real treat, a real pleasure, a real historical bounty. You got to get there. It's one of the best museums in America, and it winds its way through a history of the civil rights movement, but it ends in the Lorraine Hotel room where it's glassed off now, where King and his advisors met and where he
Jesse
was
Jackson.
murdered.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you can see across the street the sniper's lair, from which we believe James Earl Ray, acting alone, we believe, shot him. And it is a real adventure and a real inspiring museum, one of the best I've ever been to. And
The same cars are still in the parking lot.
exactly, same cars in the parking lot. And there's Rosa Parks's bus. There's all kinds of mementos and reconstructions, and you feel you're going through time. You're fighting and alongside real heroes, and you are experiencing the tragedy of America's, or whoever it was, pushback against these change agents. I would not be the person I am if I hadn't gone to this. Growing up in Minnesota, it brought alive things that I just couldn't have known where I lived.
Well, you were. Well, I guess you were still a kid, right? For MLK.
Yeah, I remember when he was shot. I remember when Bobby Kennedy was shot. And I remember the aftermath. Minnesota in the 70s had as much draft resistance and anti-war marches, and even sort of big clashes with the cops and National Guard, even as any place in the country. It's always been a place that's sort of on the barricades for social change. But King, aside from putting him in the context of this whole thing, which is a little difficult because they aren't they aren't exactly the same.
No,
Looking
they're
for the right, looking for the rights of, looking out for the rights of people who were brought to the country as slaves and then given raw deal after raw deal as they tried to survive the American experience as equal beings, as dignified humans, frustrated in a million ways, and having to actually go up against dogs on the street and, you know, lynchings and all the other things. That's a different story than this. And making them overlap is, I think, doesn't do justice to certainly the civil rights movement.
No,
it wasn't. It was baked into America's founding. It was baked into our Civil War history. It was baked into our cities and the fabric of our society in a way that I don't think any other problem has been in our history.
Yeah, I just think that we could use somebody like him right now, right? Like, you know, we're in a moment where the country just desperately needs a voice that has credibility with, you know, lots of people, even though he didn't, as you point out, at the end of his life. But also, I just always think that that last speech is so incredible, given that he was murdered the next day.
You know what we're missing now in you know, certainly in this ICE business or anti-ICE business, but in general, eloquence. We're missing eloquence. We're missing people who can somehow get up there and, you know, quote the Bible, give lines from spirituals, use the great cadences of the great orators going back to Greece, Rome, and frankly,
Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Yeah, and we are missing not just leaders who can bring sides together, but people who can speak in a language serious enough, moving enough, and grounded enough to make our history feel less like some kind of like horrible scramble for, you know, attention on social media, and more like an attempt to improve our destiny as a country.
Yeah, and to that has gravitas and weight behind it, right? Like, you know, I remember, you know, one of the things I wrote about yesterday, I had remembered reading in Carl Sandburg's biography of Lincoln that Tolstoy at the end of his life had spoken very highly of Lincoln, called him a saint of humanity, and compared him to Jesus, and even said that actually one of the stories he told was about visiting a very remote tribe in the Caucasus Mountains where they didn't even know anything about America, but Lincoln's name was known to this very remote tribe. And they asked Tolstoy about him, and he gave a story about how Lincoln was murdered, but that he, before his death, he had strange presentiments of trouble coming, and that he had been, you know, disturbed by dreams. And, you know, it's hard not to think of that and then see that little clip of King, who was a you know, a figure of similar weight, and, you know, wonder a little bit, right? Like, how did he know what was coming, or why talk about that at that moment? I don't know. It was just
God told him, Matt. You know, I hate to, you know, pull off the mask of the Christian mystic Walter, but that's who's under, you know, a lot of this commentary. And there are things that go on in the history of mankind that can only be accounted for by spiritual forces. And Martin Luther King's success, his influence, and his demise all have the finger of God nearby.
Yeah, maybe.
That's me. That's white nationalist Christian asshole Walter. But
no,
I'm just kidding. I really do. I mean, it's times like this when I see America doing so poorly at its basic job, which is modeling the behavior of a free people under law, but not so tightly under law that they don't have to be responsible, and so on. I don't like the mass suspension of civil and polite and traditional ways of dealing with our differences.
Right.
Walking in sunglasses to church to roast people about their freaking alleged racism, whatever else is wrong with it, it's not what I love about my country. And
there's a lack of respect, right? And everybody's seeing it, and it's too bad, right?
Yeah.
In the few minutes we have left, let's listen to Don Lemon talking to Keith Ellison. This is SOT 17. This is another excuse for why this was those protests were okay.
Attorney General, I know you know what's going on. I'm sure you've heard of what's going on. What do you think of this and what happened at the church and all that?
Well, let me tell you, I think that, the protest is fundamental to American society. This country started in a protest, and, it's freedom of expression. People have a right to lift up their voices and make their peace. And none of us are immune from the voice of the public. So quite honestly, I think that you got the First Amendment, freedom of religion, and the First Amendment, freedom of expression. And I think that, it's just something you got to live with in a society like this. They're getting tender about a church service now, but, these people they're arresting people in clinics, schools, churches, anywhere they choose to do it. And so they don't really care about sacred and sensitive places unless it works in their favor. And,
you certainly don't care. And the
and
people in that church didn't do anything,
about police
dude.
Until those police are protecting democracy, then they don't care about police suddenly. I mean, these people are highly selective.
These people.
And I think that if people want to protest the behavior of, a particular religious leader, then people are allowed to do that. That's my 2 cents on that.
You're a lawyer, dude.
I was going to say, he's the attorney general, right? Isn't he? I mean,
what in the world? You're supposed to be protecting the civil rights of your people. I mean, I have to remind myself and the audience that what's going on in Minnesota happens against the backdrop of an ongoing investigation and ongoing revelations about malfeasance, corruption, and fraud among a political in-group that possibly implicates a political in-group of which he would be a member in a very serious way. And that they're all getting to be philosophers of free speech and freedom of religion at a moment when 2 weeks ago they might want to be calling their defense attorney is wonderful for them, but for me it's a little grating. It's a little grating to hear the idealistic Ellison in a state that is so poorly run and where so much money has gone out the window and where I expect state officials are going to be in major legal jeopardy and were the center of attention just a couple of weeks ago and not for their high principles.
Okay, just really quickly, let's go to 18 because Ellison elaborates on his theory of the First Amendment there, which is kind of amazing.
Is this an attack on? To me, it feels like an attack on the First Amendment, and trying to. And this is just my assessment. You don't have to agree with this, Mr. Attorney General, but trying to tie me as a journalist, to turn me into an activist, and I'm not. I was not there in activism at all. I was there just simply chronicling.
Oh no, you weren't,
what
dude.
journalists do all the time.
Well, let me just remind you, Don, they're over here throwing comedian. They're over here throwing comedians off the air for telling jokes. So Jimmy Kimmel's is off the air because he's making jokes. They won't. The Mad King won't let you say jokes about him. So the First Amendment is completely optional in their eyes. And let me tell you, the First Amendment includes freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom to redress grievances. So that is absolutely under attack when FCC licenses are on the line based on whether or not you're congenial in the eyes of the president. So yeah, join the club. I know as journalists want to be objective, neutral, but the truth is, if you have an unjust ruler, objectivity is a threat to them. And so, sorry, but that's how it is, friend. You know, your First Amendment prerogatives are interfering with their tyrannical prerogatives, and that's how it is.
Whatever, dude.
No, it's just amazing. Like, okay, go ahead.
Your cohort has canceled more comedians and jokes over the years than I can certainly count. The First Amendment was, until the great Jimmy Kimmel, became a martyr, systematically fraying and under attack, and endangered in a way that I might have thought was maybe terminal a couple of years ago. And the shoe was on the other foot. They are all acting like victims. They're all acting like some kind of I don't know, heroes of expression, heroes of civil liberties, heroes of all things constitutional. But it's not working. It's wearing a little thin. The context mitigates against it, and the behavior of the street troops is not that of mutual respect for speech. It just isn't. I mean, then why can't the guy wear his freaking flag shirt?
Why can't he wear his flag shirt, and why can't the FCC commissioner complain about Jimmy Kimmel? There's a reason why he can't, right? Like, you and I argued about this a little, but the argument against that would be that it would be jawboning, but that's nowhere near as clear a case as barging into a church and interrupting
dude. You closed churches under COVID.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's that too.
I never saw a more wholesale and industrial strength abrogation of civil rights than I did during COVID, all without real even attempts to make anything legally coherent out of the decisions. Just, it's an emergency. Remember Tim Walz having the cops shoot paintball guns at people sitting out on their porch because they hadn't gone inside. Now we get the freedom of assembly lecture. We don't have a very high quality ranks of politicians
or lawyers, for that
or
matter.
lawyers at the moment, and all these gestures to civil rights and so on, ringing a little hollow for me.
It just, everybody's gotten, it's just complete and utter cynicism when you invoke the First Amendment to talk about that church protest. What you're basically saying is that anything goes. There's no there are no places where people
he said it rather simply. When you have an unjust ruler, it's kind of, any strike back, any resistance, any measure taken somehow has a moral stature that it might not otherwise. But they keep slipping things by. Why is he an unjust ruler? Was he not elected? Was he, the same way you were, Keith? America wants to be a principled place of good people and so on, but you're going to have to agree on the principles. You can't just, and you're going to have to honor them over time and over a variety of situations for us to take this seriously.
And ultimately to tie everything up again, that's why I wanted to bring up MLK, because not just because it was the holiday yesterday, but because he struggled over exactly what Ellison was saying there, like his whole justification for everything from the Montgomery bus boycott to the letter from the Birmingham jail when he got arrested for violating a anti-parading statute that was clearly illegal, right? He first did an analysis that the law was unjust, right? And then he convinced himself by consulting like every conceivable scholar that there was on the subject that the only way to show reverence for the law was to resist an unjust one, right? But when you do that, in order to show reverence, you had to do it in a way that showed that you were willing to accept the punishment, that you were, again, that you did it openly, lovingly, without a spirit of hatred. Like, that's what a serious person does when they resist injustice. And for Keith Ellison, all he's saying is, yeah, just go in, go fuck people up in church and yell at them and put them on the internet and whatever. Like,
and he's also considers it almost stipulated that the laws under which these folks are being deported are, I don't know, void or something. I mean, it is an assumption of what he's talking about, that these are stormtroopers, that these are people who shouldn't be there enforcing laws that aren't, licit, and tearing apart the moral fabric of America. He could be in court doing something about this, I suppose, but all this jawboning, they don't stand on the shoulders of giants, these type. They stand in the shadows of them, deep in the shadows.
Yeah. And look, Trump isn't sitting there consulting Abraham Lincoln and when he's doing what he's doing either, but this whole thing about anything goes, and once you conclude that something is unjust, then you can call anybody anything. You don't have to submit to the punishment for it, right? You can say that the laws that you violated no longer apply to you. I mean, that just seems ignoble to me, right?
The signal thing that I doubt Martin Luther King would be doing,
right,
is vilifying a race, turning this into a some kind of a battle with the evil, white religious contingent of America. King wanted allies. King welcomed allies, and he welcomed everyone to his cause. He challenged people to rise above the specifics of their backgrounds and the prejudices and the folk ways that may not have been very helpful in their groups. But he did not tell you who the enemy was. Not other people in
well, it was
by virtue of their skin color,
not by virtue of their skin color,
and by virtue, and it was not other people by virtue of their middle class lifestyles. Though he was, absolutely an advocate for the poor, and I'm uncomfortable with people borrowing that penumbra, that aura for what seem to be lesser ends and more undisciplined and chaotic actions. I don't know. Looking forward in terms of the Minnesota thing, I sort of see it as a little played out. Given where it's headed, I think America's getting real tired and real weary of it. It's the miniseries is not a hit. But
see, I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, because the whole point that I wanted to make by bringing these two episodes up is that each one had the effect of further radicalizing their respective audiences, right? The Trump administration is now going to investigate and prosecute people. They've got additional people on standby to send to the area. They're pissed off, and they're looking to get political capital out of the church incident, among other things. Meanwhile, the protests have the DOJ apparently they just served subpoenas to Waltz, Fry, and other Minnesota officials. So this thing, I think, is heating up, and because of the stratification of social media, we're heading towards this like a Summer of Floyd type of situation. I think faster, but I hope I'm wrong about that. But that's what it seems to me.
It could be. I sometimes I have sources, sometimes I have information. On this, I have only the lowly vibes, and I just get a feeling of a group that's overplayed its hand and is in some ways offending all those who it should win over. I mean, if it's an anti-white movement, if it's going to be an anti-religious movement, or a certain kind of Christianity will be criticized, it's going to lose the authority with which it might win anyone over, and just become a cultural revolutionary battle over sort of general anti-American sentiments. And I don't know how you accomplish an end. And I actually don't know what their goal is either. Get ICE out of Minneapolis? That's not going to happen. Stop the deportation of illegals? That's not going to happen. Maybe it's just going to go on as a tumult, as a form of turmoil, but it doesn't seem to have an end point or an exit strategy.
Yeah, I think everybody's invested in escalation at this point. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Who knows? Maybe I'll even be in Minnesota when we do the next show. So anyway, we have to pick a new book. We didn't get to one today. But thanks everybody for coming to hang out. Sorry about yesterday, and we will see you later this week.
See you later.